Terima kasih kerana bersama kami. Ini adalah Buletin Awani Khas. Saya Ibrahim Sani. Bersama kami pada petang ini adalah Bridget Welsh, penganalisis politik Asia Tenggara. Bridget, thanks for taking the time to speak with us. There are some key hygiene questions, I suppose, that I have to ask you. The parliamentary session that is scheduled for September 6th, do you think that's going to go on? And of course, what about the nature of the caretaker Prime Minister? Do you think that Tan Sri Muhyiddin is going to flex his muscle, even though he is being dubbed as the caretaker Prime Minister? Those are the two things that I really need to clarify before we jump into other things.
Sure. Good evening. It's great to be here. It's lovely to be in your show. I would say just first to the question about the issue of Parliament. I think going to Parliament is going to be very important for whoever becomes Prime Minister to get this form of legitimacy. I understand it right now. There are still those that are pushing for a Magaran, which is a national council, and in order for them to have kind of the space of not having to have parliamentary legitimacy and get the numbers. I think so far all indications are that things are a go towards Parliament. But the question becomes is whether or not the different factions and the different contenders are able to get their numbers to 111. I think at this particular juncture, no one is there. But I think that there are fierce negotiations taking place to assure that they can reach the 111 majority. And I think that having a majority from Parliament is especially important. Not only is it a protocol in democracies, but it is also, given the fact that there has been questions about the previous government being appointed and not necessarily getting parliamentary legitimacy consistently and was pushed out because it didn't have a majority. I think any new government would need to be able to prove its numbers in Parliament itself. Now to your second question, which has to do with the issue of whether or not Muhyiddin Yassin will sort of still flex his muscles. I think that he has resigned. He's there in a temporary role, a role that gives him some face, but at the same juncture is definitely a role where he is no longer meaningfully a prime minister, in that sense that he doesn't have the same powers that he had before he resigned. That said, I think that what's going to be important is to see which contenders are able to get the numbers. And Muhyiddin Yassin still in his camp in PN still holds a certain amount of numbers. And how those numbers move and who to whom will be very important. So I think it is a misnomer to say that he still isn't important. He is. But it is a question of how long and how long it will take. In some countries, it takes a long time to form a new government in coalition systems, sometimes as long as 6 months. This is unlikely to be the situation in Malaysia. I expect that it will happen before the parliament vote, and it will be confirmed in the parliament vote. So we should see this resolved in a matter of weeks, and for some cases, maybe even a matter of days. I understand the king is meeting with the first set of leaders tomorrow to discuss their various numbers, and I think this shows really a commitment to trying to resolve the impasse that the country is at. And I think by making Muhyiddin Yassin a caretaker, basically keeping him in a role, it's putting pressure on alternatives and the opposition to get their act together to be able to show they have a majority, because they're the ones that called out Muhyiddin Yassin in the first place.
Yeah, in light of that, you were talking about the majority numbers being cobbled together. This is actually the essence of the nature of politics that are currently shifting right now. One would think that the traditional allies would congregate amongst each other, but while we have that notion in mind, they might not necessarily have the necessary numbers to get it across that finishing line of 110 or 111. This would also mean that they have to break away from convention and try to build partisanship or relationship with other folks that might not be traditionally their allies, resulting in one or many of those factions, in a way, sacrificing their core beliefs, their core identity. Do you feel that this sacrificial idea or ideals would be the stumbling block on many of them putting together the alliances needed to get that number? What would be some of the price needed to pay to get that number, that magic number that we speak of?
So as you've rightly described, Malaysian politics is deeply polarized. There are people who don't want to work and parties that don't want to work with different other parties. Now we see a situation where the dynamics are much more fragmented, even within parties itself. And even individuals could actually move in particular ways. I think what is interesting now and vital for the country is that people have to put aside some of their traditional party antagonisms and come together, because the country is in the most serious crisis that it's ever had. And this is testing the elites, but it's also testing the system as a whole. And I think that what we're going to see is that there have been overtures made towards individuals across party lines, and of course, and there is an attempt to try to bridge and work towards the middle. The parties that have the advantage are those that can actually work towards the middle. So, for example, a PAS and a DAP are seen to be on the two various poles, but the other parties are in the middle and able to move. What we saw in the previous government is the way that the coalition was cobbled together was through incentives, providing positions for people. The country cannot afford this type of politics again, because what it is, it's basically the buyer's politics, as opposed to a politics that's focused on the people. And it really it contributed to a system where people were given many of their positions based on loyalty, based on the power that they have. The country is facing financial constraints. It doesn't need a cabinet of over 70 people. It needs a cabinet that is focused on getting the job done. And I think this is pushing the elites to see this. And one of the things that's very important to understand about this crisis that has happened, this political transition, while a lot of this was determined by the elites, and particularly the UMNO for 15 pulling support from Muhyiddin Yassin among the different individuals and parties, often determined by personality. They would not have been able to do that if there wasn't public pressure on Muhyiddin Yassin's government in terms of his COVID management. It gave them political space to do this, but also a reason to do this that was beyond their personal interest. And I think the issue of managing COVID is still very fundamental of what is going on right now. And I think there's expectation among the public to provide leadership that can work together in this crisis circumstances. Keep in mind,
so who's going to provide that leadership as we speak right now? There's no cabinet, there's no prime minister, with the full title. Is the leadership going to be brought about by the government servants, by DG Hisham or by the KSN or KSU? Where do we turn to find that leadership?
Well, this is something that it's very clear that, Malaysians are not used to a coalition system where the parties and people change during the time, even out of an election time. And so this is the second time this is happening. And for many people, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of trauma. But coalition systems change across the world regularly. And whether or not it's Italy, Norway, UK, Australia, these are common practices. So the government is not about the persons in power, it's about the procedures and institutions. And one of the challenges now is that the institutions in Malaysia need to be strengthened to assure when elites have to change, they don't necessarily have the same sort of anxiety. Now, who's going to provide the leadership at this juncture? Many of the key positions in the civil service will have important roles to play during this time. And I think this is where longer term, strengthening the civil service at the top is going to be very important, because to manage the fact that you have a fragmented political system, you do have a coalition politics, and these are not going to these issues are not going to go away in an election. This is the dynamic that is part of the new situation in Malaysia, and I think that this is why we see the circumstances as they are. But my sense is that because Malaysians expect leadership, they want to have clear identity of who's in charge. There will be a lot of pressure for this impasse to be resolved very quickly. And this is why you may even see the parliamentary date moved up from September 6th to an earlier date to give a confirmation. And I expect in this week ahead that we will see someone be asked to form a government or to try to get those numbers among those who have the most likely chance of forming a government.
About 40-50 minutes ago, UMNO President Datuk Sri Zahid Hamidi suggested 4 key items. I'm sure you have had a read of it. I am going to read out some of the suggestions that he has brought forward. One of them is to create a war cabinet. What do you think of this idea of a war cabinet? In fact, should we give a lot of weight towards what Datuk Sri Zahid Hamidi is even suggesting?
I think it's important that Malaysia have a multi-partisan government, and that includes representing different regions, different ethnic communities, and also includes women and younger people. I don't think the word war is appropriate. I think that it should be focused on COVID management, and I think whoever comes into government, the more they can get into the tent, and not only just the bodies and the individuals, but people who know what they're doing. You have to have competent people in the key positions in health, in the finance. These are the key areas that are about COVID-19 that I think are going to be crucial. So I think that the spirit of multi-partisanship that Zahid was mentioning is an important one. But I think that there is still the questions about who's in that and how they go about their business. I think that what's important is all the different political parties now need to be thinking not just about themselves, but about what they're going to do in terms of addressing this very serious crisis that the country is facing.
All right. I tweeted out something quite interesting. I actually counted down to the day of people of the administration of all the previous prime ministers, all the way from Tunku Abdul Rahman. But if you look at Datuk Sri Najib, over 3,000 days, Tun Mahathir, 655 days, Tan Sri Muhyiddin, 532 days. It's getting smaller and smaller, the number of days of people becoming PM. Do you feel that this is a path to political maturity? Or do you feel that this is a greater symbol of the country's political system being more unstable? Which one of the two is correct in reading these kind of data?
So I saw your tweet, and I congratulate you on your hard work of doing the research there to show that Muhyiddin Yassin.
It wasn't hard work. It was just me sitting on my sofa and using a calculator. It's just about that. I mean, I just want to point that out. People are saying, "Oh, you're hardworking." No. It was just me and a calculator. That's about it. But sorry to interject.
Not at all. No, please. I would say that I think what is interesting is that in Japan, the average tenure of a prime minister up until recently was less than 2 years. And I think that we do see some countries where there is a lot of fluidity in the leadership, but the country is still quite stable. And I think when we talk about stability in the context of Malaysia, I think that the institutions are still functioning. The government is still running. I think none of the different parties have very fundamentally different agendas from the perspective of they're still pro-business. They're still focused on strengthening the society and the social safety net. I mean, yes, there are differences, but they're not as different as they might be in other countries. And I think that the perception is that the government is still not able to do its job without one person at the top. That's not the case. I think that we can see that the police are doing their business. We can see that the other organizations are working, such as the Ministry of Health, and they will continue to work during this period. Now, is it the question about maturity? I think that what we see is we're seeing greater pressure and change. I wouldn't use necessarily the word maturity yet, because I think the political leaders still have a long way to go to reach the expectations of the public. But I do think that what we're seeing is more demands being placed by the public on their leaders. And we also see a more complex society, which involves different ways of engaging. And what makes it more challenging now is that whoever governs is coming in arguably at the most difficult time that the country has ever had. The numbers of deaths, the numbers of the state of the economy. This is not something that is anybody would want to take on, although there are contenders for that. But it is going to be a challenge, a real challenge in that context. So the way I see Malaysian politics, from my perspective, I know a lot of people feel, oh, this is constant changing. They're fed up, the politicking, the politicians. And I think those are legitimate concerns. But I think at the same juncture, what we're also seeing are other trends that people aren't recognizing, which is greater demands for accountability, greater calls to make the system work more effectively. We're seeing, accountability. If you don't do your job, you will be kicked out. by some way or in a particular area. So there are things that are shifting that reflect the kind of more demands and more expectations of the Malaysian public.
Okay, which brings to mind that whole idea of perception. How do people perceive Malaysia? Do you feel that foreign observers are looking at us in a negative light, or are they quite impressed by the rate of change of government, all seemingly rather peaceful if you think about it? There's no riots on the streets, not yet at least, and hopefully never will be. But do you think that the perception of outsiders looking into Malaysia, do you feel that it's well, good, so to speak, when it comes to the Malaysian political system?
I think that they're hearing a lot of Malaysians complain about what's happening. And I think that's resonating internationally because we're in a very interconnected global world where people are saying, hey, the COVID management needs to be improved, the economy needs to be improved, there need to be reforms. And I think that also the concerns and perceptions of political instability, which I think are at the elite level, but they're not necessarily more fundamental in the society or in the institutions. But I think the problem for the international community of late has been the COVID management. The lockdown has been too long, and this has affected global supply chains in terms of the economy. And I think we also see a situation where the numbers have raised concerns internationally in terms of the cases and the management of that. And I think some of that is well-meaning concern because nobody wants to see the hospitals strained the way they are in Malaysia, and some of that is a sort of a questioning of how the government has been working, and of course some investors have reallocated their funds to other countries because there's a perception that the previous government under Muhyiddin was not as friendly to the outside than the previous ones were. And I think some of that came from the policies. But I do think that, Malaysia is experiencing what a lot of other countries are experiencing in the world. And Southeast Asia has been very badly hit by the Delta variant, especially. We see a government in Thailand facing a vote of no confidence for its COVID management. Indonesia has been called the pandemic epicenter for a period of time. So I think that when you kind of stack Malaysia up to other countries in the regions, from Thailand to the Philippines to Indonesia, Malaysia is not doing as badly as was being perceived within the country itself. But in the context of the country's experience, this is the most serious traumatic crisis. And so that is resonating where people see things and they hear what Malaysians are saying, which is really kind of unprecedented suffering, which is very troubling for those of us who care deeply about what's happening in the country.